So why do you think that brands have struggled to embrace in some ways this kind of engagement, relationship affinity marketing idea?
I have a very strong opinion on that. It's because they look at it as campaigns, and everything is a campaign to them. And there is a start and finish, and then they move on to the next thing. And I hate the word campaign when I'm working with brands.
I love that. Hey everybody, welcome into Radical Content, another great episode today. Today I am joined by Mark Graser, and I'm super pumped to have Mark and kind of dive into both his career and just everything that you've done, Mark, in content marketing and what you're going to be doing kind of in the future. So welcome to Radical Content, super pumped to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
You know what's funny, Mark, is we've never officially met until today, so this is fun. But I know a bunch of your buddies from the old Marriott days, and when I was at Universal Parks and Resorts, I literally was trying to steal the playbook that y'all created. Y'all were doing it at such a massive scale. And I think you just inspired so many people, especially in the travel space, to think about content marketing differently, to think about inspirational content. And so, whether it was you, I've met David Beebe and had him on the show before. Mark Battaglia is a buddy of mine. And now I get to talk to you. And so I feel like I'm getting all the leaders. I know there's some other people that are working on the social side. But at Universal, we literally tried to build out we called it Discover Universal. So it was like this hub for videos, shows, podcasts, kind of this whole idea. We had Universal Live, we called it internally. Then we kind of, ripped off the idea of M Live from Marriott. So I just say all that to say, the work that y'all did at Marriott and still continue to do today, as you guys have kind of spidered out, was really cool. And it just inspired me along the way. So, thank you for all that. And I'm super kind of pumped to jump in and pick your brain on all that stuff. How's that for a start?
I like it. No, thanks so much for saying that, because it's something that I'm super proud of too, that I was able to do. I started my career as a traditional journalist at a variety and advertising age, and covering all aspects of the business. And that's what I loved about my position at those companies. It's like I had this opportunity to soak in as much information as possible and learn from all these amazing producers and studio heads, and just everything from development of projects on through distribution. And so then during my career, I started writing more about what brands were doing. And I was getting a little frustrated because I was doing a lot of stories about what brands were doing in content and entertainment, but they were doing maybe one thing and not all of it, or they were doing something that just people weren't seeing and experiencing. And so for myself, I kept on saying, this could be so much better, but I can't do anything about it until I actually work for one of these big brands. Yeah. And so I essentially had to, even though I was covering these companies doing all this stuff, I also had to learn how to speak brand a little bit more and a little bit better, and understand, what are these companies even talking about, like in these marketing meetings? Like, why aren't they doing certain things? And so
what was your reaction when you first got into these marketing meetings? You were like, these people are crazy.
It was nice because I learned immediately that nobody really knows what they're doing. And that really did level.
It calms you down. You're like, I'm okay. I can exist in this world.
And it happened pretty quickly. There were a lot of meetings initially there. I was like, wait a minute, these people have no clue what they're doing. And so I had put them on this pedestal, right? Like these executives, these leaders are just like the smartest people in the world. No, like when it comes to entertainment and content and trying to tell stories, it's like, wait a minute, I actually know a little bit more. And now I'm going to help them do this in the right way. So it leveled the playing field. It made me feel way more confident of like, okay, cool. Now let's do this.
That's awesome. So I love that. So let's dig into that part of the story a little bit, which is you're a journalist. I was in sports radio many years ago before I got into marketing. So I love people that come from the journalism, the broadcasting, the news side of things, because they bring this editorial mindset that you just can't get when you come up through marketing. It's just a different mindset. And so I talk a lot about that with our guests on here, but I want to hear you talk about, like, how did that happen? How did that transition happen? Did someone kind of pick up the phone and be like, hey, Mark, we need someone to come in here and kind of do what we do in editorial for a brand? Or did you pursue that? How did that happen in the beginning?
Yeah, I've always tended to hit up the companies that I want to work for.
Mm-hmm.
And I had written a couple stories about what Marriott was doing, what David Beebe was doing, and this was pretty early on. And then again, the timing of it all, I was looking for a new challenge. I was getting a little bored with just writing the same kind of profile over and over again of these companies doing the same thing. And so that's when I started having conversations. And then Marriott offered me a role to be their first editorial director and
Yeah.
to create this thing. They knew they needed to talk to younger travelers, not just millennials, but just younger travelers who never went to Marriott.com to book a hotel room. Like these people were just never going to go to that website. So when I contacted Marriott and said, "Hey, do you actually have anything that I might be good for?" And by the way, Marriott was not my favorite hotel company at the time. It was Starwood, Starwood with a W,
Oh yeah.
and you
They
know,
bought Starwood. Yeah.
yeah, and that was the thing.
Yeah.
Like after I joined, they bought Starwood. I'm like, great. Became the biggest hotel company in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they flew me out. They said, here's this opportunity. You can be our first editorial director, build out the team to create this product that we are envisioning as our own travel and leisure publication, but for Marriott. And they're
Yeah.
like, do you want to do it? Like, do you want to take it over, run it, like, build the whole thing? So yes,
I love
absolutely. Like,
I love that, and the thing I'd say about that's so important is a lot of times people think that content marketing starts with a desire from a storyteller to just want to tell stories about the brand, but
mhm,
it doesn't. It starts with a unique brand problem that we're trying to solve, and your brand problem you're trying to solve was how can we be relevant to younger audiences that are not going to visit our website and are not going to consider us?
yeah,
What are they interested in, and how can we start to show up in ways that are more compelling for them and attract them and draw them in? And so I love that little point that you made kind of in there as you were just thinking about the role of Marriott and the opportunity, because I think that's a really important one. A lot of people are going to go start content programs for content programs' sake, whether it's ego or it's just kind of what they want to do. But it's really kind of understanding your brand and your business. And I always say it's not for everyone. Everybody can entertain 100% across your own channels. But the level of investment, I mean, Marriott went deep from an investment standpoint into MLive and into Traveler, into the original content and stories that they were
mhm.
doing. They had the original, they had a television network, right, in all of the hotels. And so they went real deep, but it was because of a specific reason. And so I love that you brought that up.
Well, let me expand upon that. So I almost said no to the job because it required me to move from LA to DC. I'd
Mm,
never really lived on the East Coast. Obviously, I went there a lot, but I didn't feel like moving to DC. It wasn't really a city that I was ever interested in. So I'm driving back to work the next day and I'm thinking to myself, this opportunity will never come up again. If you don't take this and just do it, you're gonna miss out. So I said yes immediately. I talked to my husband about it. He is from the East Coast, so he was like, "Okay, yeah, we'll go to DC." So we did it, and that was in 2015. What got me to say yes, though, was they flew me out to Marriott headquarters in the basement of Marriott, and I'm sure David and Mark maybe have talked about this too. But there are these fake hotel rooms, so they have a mock hotel room for each brand, and you can see what the designers are doing and what they're trying to do with each brand just to modernize them, new furniture, new everything, new wall decor. So I'm walking into these rooms and I'm like, wait a minute, so even the courtyard room is cool. What you're doing with all these different spaces, I'm like, what is happening here at Marriott at the time? And they said, we have this reputation of being the boring beige hotel room company, and we want to change that. And I could see it right there. And I'm like, okay, but that's what I love about brands. When a brand understands where it is and where it stands with consumers and what it needs to do to change, And that excites me. And so they were showing me not only are they going to change and they're doing something about it, they're going to do it right now, with or without me. And so I wanted to be part of that journey.
Man,
And I wanted to understand too. It's like once I was told, okay, no, we're not. You guys aren't going to be the weird kids down the hall doing content. You're going to be in every single marketing meeting
mm,
with all 30 brands that the company had, and you'll have a voice, and you'll be pitching to Mr. Marriott and talking to him about, what you're doing and why it's relevant.
yeah.
That's when I had to say yes.
Man, I got chills as you were telling that story, and the reason why is because I felt something similar at Universal. You know, whenever I was at Universal, we had this big dominant, competitor down the street in Walt Disney World, and they still do today. But I felt like they had this big opportunity to show up for consumers and stand for something different and be bold, and uh, and I felt like it was relevant with our audience. I felt like it was culturally relevant for the timeline. If we could just like lean into it and become this brand that we were talking about and inspiring to be. And I think they're still in that journey. In a lot of ways, they're succeeding at it from a product standpoint. But I'm with you, and I got excited about that, and I can tell that you got excited about that. And there are definitely points in our careers where you can light up for the mission, and the mission was to be a part of changing a brand that was something and evolving and turning it into something that it can be. Everybody's got a little fixer upper in them. Everybody's got a little chip in Joanne. They want to be that person that does that for a team or for a brand or for a company, for a business. Storytellers are the same. And so I love that. So take us inside of Traveler for a little bit. For those that don't know it, Marriott Traveler was like a bad to the bone, like editorial travel website, like not like just a hotel blog. Like this is like a destination editorial, the photography, the writing, it was highly visual, still exists today. So, go check it out. But tell us a little bit of the vision, your vision of Traveler, and how you got to where you got to, and maybe even a little bit of the inner workings of it, the size of team, and how did you function something like that? Because there's so many people that listen to this show that love content, would love to do the things that I've done or that you've done. Well, really, you've done the things that you've done, but it seems like impossible. So just kind of open up even maybe a little bit of the inner workings of that functional team.
Yeah, the idea was always to launch a website, a separate website, have a standalone thing that was separate from Marriott.com, but would drive to Marriott.com. And so it's like, how do you do that? What should it be? And everybody was doing blogs at the time. They just weren't that interesting. So I thought, could we do basically Marriott's version of Travel and Leisure online? Because print is just way too expensive, especially with so many hotels. And like, who was that going to go to? And most people were going to read everything online anyway. Or access it through social media channels. So we launched a whole new thing from scratch, which can be, difficult to do when there's no brand equity behind it. Like how many people are going to visit this thing initially? But what we also wanted to do was I wanted to hire real journalists who told real stories. It was about the story first. And the stories were all going to be about destinations. Marriott is in most cities. They probably have at least 5 to 10 hotels in those major destinations. So you're probably going to stay in a Marriott anyway. But the idea was, how do you get people to go to those places? How do you inspire them? So it was all about inspiring people, informing them and entertaining them too. So the stories couldn't be necessarily about the Marriott hotels, because you're probably already going to be staying in one. So if we did a story like that, it would be about the chef who works there. It would be about the interior designer, like the person who created the space and why it looks that way. We wanted to really look into why you should go to a place, what you should do there, without it being the 10 top things to do in Boston or, the typical stories you could find anywhere else. It really had to bring the places, the destinations to life. And so I hired a great team of writers and editors who then produced this content, and we published pretty much every day. We publish more than some media companies do for their outlets, but you had to, because Google was rewarding you with search, like if you are constantly publishing and getting
Yeah.
the stuff out there. And we had a lot that we could do. When you work in media, you basically have 12 different jobs. You might have a beat or two, but you're doing 12 different things. And so I took that same thing to Marriott, and my whole team came from traditional news outlets. So like we were used to just churning stuff out, but also taking a step back and really thinking about what we were doing and how we were trying to talk to that younger consumer. Travel content is good and it works when you're helping someone do something, when you're helping somebody travel better, plan their trip better. And just don't throw stuff at people.
Hmm.
Yeah, it really has to do something. And that's, I think, any piece of branded content needs to do that
Yeah.
if you're going to get anyone's attention.
Yeah. How did we talk? So, you talk about the team, a bunch of writers kind of from news and journalism backgrounds. How did the team operate when it came to, the actual story mining, the research, the brainstorming even, I think of brainstorming for marketing done very differently from an editorial standpoint. How did that work? How did you try to bring an editorial mindset to how do you decide what our content strategy is and what are the stories that we're going to tell?
hmm Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we treated it like a newsroom. So we would have regular weekly pitch meetings. We would understand what kind of stories are we trying to tell. What should those stories be, especially as we grew. So, we published articles first, and then we got into videos, short form videos for social. Then we got into launching Marriott's first podcast series, and we had multiple series. And we started working with the partners, the individual brands, but also the partners. So the loyalty team was a huge partner of ours because Traveler didn't start growing until we got Traveler articles into the weekly loyalty email newsletters that went
Hmm.
out to millions of people. And so that team liked us because most of their emails were always just offers, like 30% off a hotel discount. There were
Right.
discounts, there were a whole bunch of different things like that. I saw it as, well, get our travel stories into your newsletter, like at least one. Just give me one block a week. Because then those people come to Traveler and then bounce back to Marriott.com. I'm like, I need to create this digital ecosystem where it's going to keep people in the Marriott family. But how do I do that? I need to get in front of millions and millions of people, which the loyalty team had. Once they started publishing our articles with their newsletters, they saw engagement rates go up 30%. Because now their email was helping people do something. It wasn't just a marketing push of offers all the time. And so
Well, you're
they
speaking my
started,
language right now, Mark.
yeah, I mean, they started incorporating more of our stuff then every week. Um, Marriott Traveler, by the way, now is part of Marriott Bonvoy. It is
Sure.
part of the loyalty program. They took it over after I left. And so the team that I built is still there. They're still creating all this amazing content, the
Yeah.
video series, everything now. So I'm really proud of that. And it showed that you can create something really valuable to the company. Just give it time, keep doing the right thing, and it'll grow. Within the third year of Marriott Traveler, it generated $20 million in bookings, hotel room bookings, and advertising through links, through all the content. And we could attribute all those bookings to the articles because, we had codes in these links too.
Right. I love what y'all did. Could you do that today? It's a different world today. It's like a TikTok world. And I know social media was around then, but this long form, kind of article. I mean, even the Buzz feeds of the world have changed kind of their model. The media
Mhm.
industry has kind of changed. What would you say to a travel company that's like, man, I love the story side of what y'all brought to life? Is that something you still feel like you can do today for these big brands that have stories to tell?
Oh, absolutely. You just have to be everywhere. You have to take you have to look at every story you're trying to tell and where does that live? Yes, there can be an article and it can be whatever format. It could be the Axios type bullet, when there's a summary at the top and then you read what you want to read. But what is the video version? What is the podcast version, if there is one? What's the TikTok version? You can't just tell one story and expect people to go to that one platform and look at
Yeah.
it. And if you're not doing that, you're not like every media company needs to be doing this too,
Yeah.
just to reach everybody wherever they decide to consume content.
Yeah, one of the things that I know the circles that we travel in, and we might be an echo chamber. We might just talk to ourselves, but we believe what we're selling. And there's this idea of brands becoming the media, right? Y'all did that. You did that at Marriott, and we'll talk about some other things that you've done that are kind of same in that ilk. And I tried to do that at Universal, but and there's a handful of examples, and we all know them. I had Amanda from Cleveland Clinic on a few episodes ago, and they're a phenomenal example of driving, true business growth through organic storytelling through their Health Essentials blog at the hospital. And so we've seen enough examples of this, yet this is still underrepresented by many, right? It's still more a performance marketing world. It's still more of a conversion world. And my take, and what we talk a lot about in Radical Content on this podcast and at Maverick Content Studio at my agency, is this idea of creating content people want, inviting them to participate, and over time building an audience. And it's that over time, right? That investment in, it's not a short-term deal. Like, you didn't start publishing articles and the audience came. It was a slow drip, and then you got some email love, and then all of a sudden, okay, now we're building momentum, right? And then you start focusing on different versions of distribution. Then you start involving more social as the channels get more social, and then all of a sudden, what you've built is a media network inside of a brand. Why do you think that brands struggle with the idea of content marketing, with the idea of brand storytelling? While people like you and I that have come from journalism and internet marketing are like, guys, it's the only pathway, because at the end of this is relationship rather than transaction. So why do you think that brands have struggled to embrace in some ways this kind of engagement, relationship affinity marketing idea?
I have a very strong opinion on that. It's because they look at it as campaigns, and everything is a campaign to them, and there is a start and finish, and then they move on to the next thing. And I hate the word campaign when I'm working with brands.
I love that.
They get stuck, and so there's checklists of what you should do with a campaign, like all the assets that need to roll out.
It becomes transactional, right? It's so transactional. It's a start stop. So yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I'm with you. I'm grooving with you.
This happened on a couple projects that I worked on recently, where it was pitched as a content hub. It was this whole experience of different forms of media. It's going to really dive into the story that the brand is doing, really get people excited and immerse themselves into it. And then at the end of the day, it became a campaign. And so the soul was sucked out of it. And suddenly it was just like, well, what's the ad going to look like? And it's like, oh, what? Like, I don't care.
How did we get here?
That is like the least interesting thing to me about this project. And so, yeah, it was disappointing to see, but it's also a reminder that any brand that gets into this content brand storytelling space needs to have support from leadership. They need to, if leadership doesn't get it, of what you're doing, what you're trying to do, you're not going to succeed, because their interest is going to disappear after, maybe 6 months, and they're going to look now at your budgets, and which, by the way, marketing, content budgets, creating content is not cheap. So I also don't like
neither is media
money. Yeah. I also don't like to spend a ton of money on creating content, because I understand what it takes, like what you can do with very few resources. Like, please, like, give me the challenge of like doing a lot with very little. You can do it, because look at all the channels and platforms out there. One of my favorite things right now is, this is for any brand, if you have a website, you're a media company, whether you want to be or not. Like, you have something that you're trying to get people to come to and look at. So it's all about what you decide to put on there. And I don't care what your brand is. Like, you could be in any story category now. Like, you have a reason to tell people a story, and everybody kind of does the same press release kind of thing. There's nothing interesting on most websites.
I always tell people, if you have customers, then you have a story to tell.
Hmm.
Someone's coming to you for a reason.
Yeah.
They have some kind of value. You're solving some kind of problem. You're making life easier for them. You're giving them something to give to a friend. Whatever it is, you have a story to tell. And whatever story you could tell in that scenario is going to be more powerful than a super crafted ad that feels like you're trying to sell somebody something.
Yeah.
So what I always say is, what do people come to you for that is actual value in their life? And let's try to find a way to tell stories around that. And then
Yeah.
going back to your comment about campaigns, I also have I don't want to say a hatred, because I work in marketing and you kind of have to embrace it a little bit, right? But I have kind of a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth around campaigns, and the only reason why is it flies in the face of, I believe, what the new philosophy is for communicating. I believe the new philosophy for communicating for modern brands is a relationship model. Well, to build a relationship, you've got to communicate with people consistently, right? I don't go to ESPN because they had something one time. I come back to ESPN all the time because I've developed a relationship. I go to Chick-fil-A a lot, and it's not just because I have a problem with their chicken sandwiches. I do have a problem with that, but it's because I've developed a relationship. So to me, campaigns is just at the opposite end of relationship. It is transactional in nature. It is stop in nature. What can we push out that people will give money for? What can we push out and people will give money for? The one area that I will change my thought a little bit, and I'm learning this. I love learning these things every single day. And one of the questions I'll ask you in a little bit will be kind of about your greatest learning. But I love the idea of thinking about micro campaigns. And when I say that, what I mean by that is, what are the chapters that we're telling throughout the year to tell a larger story? It's still a start stop, right? Sure, there's a start stop, but it's not about ad. It's about content. It's not about push. It's about conversation. And so that's something that we're even talking about here as an agency, as we talk about kind of the value that we bring to our clients. Because look, we have to understand, you have initiatives to launch. You've got things you want to talk about. You've got things that you want to sell. But how are those all chapters in a much larger story? And then how do we tell that story? That's the one kind of fireback that I've given myself as I take aim for all campaigns in the world.
Yeah, there were a couple. I agree with all that, and there's a couple things that you kind of touched on that triggered me. There was consistency is key. If you're going to do this, like, you have to do it on a regular basis, and maybe that's the journalist in me, but you just have to keep on publishing, and it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be this big thing, but you can't just like put out I've seen a lot of brands do this where like they publish a burst of things. It could be videos, articles, whatever. And then that's it. And then just sits there for 6 months. And then they're like, oh, here's another batch of stuff. And I'm like, oh, what is that? Now you're just like throwing stuff at me. You're not having that conversation. You're not building that relationship. You're not being a reason for me to come back and see what else you have. You're not creating that excitement. The other thing was, for brand storytelling for my team at Traveler, if it felt like an ad, we didn't run it. Because you could go to the Marriott website and get all that stuff. It had to be an authentic story first. And I think we built up that trust and that respect with the people that were coming to the website, that we saw the engagement numbers go up with like people returning to see, okay, what else do you have? Oh, there's another city you guys just launched, or these new profiles of people. It got to the level where, of course, I went back to, to generate more traffic. I tapped into my resources in LA, and we started profiling, filmmakers, influencers, interesting people who were traveling, who were genuine lovers of travel. And they liked what we were doing. We didn't have to pay them. We never paid anyone to profile them. Even though this was Marriott, we came from the angle of, this is editorial. This is, we're basically a publication, and we treat it that way. And so other people who would normally require, fees, we're like, yeah, we see what you're doing. So
that's great. One of the things that you talk a lot about is an episode here, or this, this franchise of content, or this brand of content. What do you mean when, I know this, but for the average content, person or marketing person that's out there, why are content franchises or brands so important?
Hmm.
And yeah, I'll just leave it there. Why are content franchises so important?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons, and I'm obviously taking that from my background in LA
Sure.
and working with studios and networks and watching what they did. I'm fascinated by shows like Top Chef or Kitchen Nightmares, or like I'm thinking a lot of food shows right now. But if you look at anything, like why does any show, that reality or otherwise, work on a regular basis? Why do you want to come back to something? Because it is a format. It is, you're taking kind of the hard work out of figuring out what you're going to create every single time. There should be a template for, especially for a video series. If you're going to make one, if you want to make more, then create that one format that you're then going to replicate.
Yeah.
I like franchises for articles because, like, behind the design, not the most innovative name, but at least you can build content under that name and then
Hmm.
have a library now of stories that you can then promote as a batch, right? So
Hmm.
come up with, we did um, we profiled fitness people that had followings online, and we called it Fit Traveler. So it was a whole series of articles about
Yeah.
these different people. So you have to think about it that way. I do some consulting work for other brands and companies, and it's interesting to meet with their content teams or their social media teams, and they don't think about that format, or franchises in that way, where it's like, okay, on Wednesday you're going to do Wednesday wins with Wednesday wisdom, or like Monday motivation. Like that's the same thing. Like think
Yeah.
about it that way, and so then you can plan your content calendar. Every
Yes.
single week
Yes.
you're going to have that post go up, because
Yeah.
now your consumer, your regular customer, is going to know, okay, whether they know it or not, they know they're going to get something new every
Yeah.
single week, every single day. Like, and because you
I
should be
love.
posting something every day. Like,
Yeah, I love this, and it's something we've not talked a lot about. But so back when I was in radio, you've got 4 segments an hour, right?
mhm,
For a 4-hour show, you've got 16 segments that you're going to do. So you got to fill up 16 segments. Well, man, would it be nice to have 4 of those that you always know what you're doing, right?
yeah, yeah,
That's in essence a radio franchise that we're doing every single week, whatever, or every single, maybe even day. Um, a newspaper, right? They've got certain blocks that they've got to
yeah,
fill, and some of them are new and original. They're writing an original thing, but some are like, we know someone went and wrote 30 of these, and we're going to plug and play.
yeah,
And to be a real content person, especially, you got to understand the power of branding a show, of formatting a series, of understanding the importance of episodes, because they create little familiar content pieces that attract people back. If everything
yeah.
is always new, right? It would be like if SNL didn't have the update desk, right?
Right, right.
Imagine if every week they had to figure out what's going in that block. Every week we got to come up with something new. But instead, they decided this thing. It works. That's the other thing about these, why you do episodes, why you do series, why you do blocks, is because you find something that works and it helps you iterate on it over and over again and come back to it. The greatest example I love, and I know it's easy for us to go to like TV and stuff like that, is House Hunters International,
Oh
right?
yeah.
It's like they
How many
found
hours of that have you watched? Yeah.
they found a model that was cheap to produce. They didn't have to
Mhm.
pay really any talent. It was text on screen before text on screen was really used on social and digital. But it was just the format worked, right? You wanted to see the reveal. That was the
Yeah.
mystery of the
And they
story, right?
gamified it. Yeah, they
And they
gamified it by letting you, oh, which one do you think they're gonna pick? Like,
Right. And they like that bouncy music, and then they go to break,
mhm.
so they keep you on the edge of your seat. And so I love this topic, and we haven't talked about it much, but I think that, yes,
But
you've got to think about the world of franchise, of series, of brands that you can iterate on continuously and potentially forever, depending on how successful they are, right?
yeah.
Like someone asked me one time years ago, this was back in the day of like Throwback Thursdays were a thing on social. And someone on
Mhm.
my team literally looked me in the face and said, "When are we gonna stop doing Throwback Thursdays? They feel like they're getting kind of lame, getting kind of old." And my response to this person was, "We're gonna stop doing them when they stop working.
Yeah,
Like if
yeah.
people love them, we're going to do them every week until we're, you know. And so, yeah, I just love this this part of the conversation because it's something
And
I've not talked about much.
even if your brand only has an email newsletter you put out, same thing. You create the
Same
blocks. Like,
thing.
I think, I think the issue a lot of times is when executives or leaders don't have not actually created content before.
Yeah.
Like if you've built an email newsletter, you're limited to what you can do with it in terms of
Yeah.
design. Like there's blocks and you're stuck with the blocks, and now it's like, what are you going to put in those blocks? Well, come up with a format for each one, and now your team knows every week we have to fill these blocks with this type of content.
Yeah.
It just takes the guessing out of it, and I think that's the thing that freaks a lot of people out too. It's like, what are we going to do? How much content are we going to create every week for these things? It's like, well, now you have a roadmap. Now you have
Mm-hmm.
something to fill. And it's kind of like a puzzle. What I loved about writing, and I still love about writing articles, is articles are a puzzle to me. Like paragraphs go certain places, like you're telling a story, it fits. When it
You're
fits, like,
right.
oh, it's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
so it also took kind of the anxiety and stress out of dealing with writing too. I think writing overwhelms people and producing content overwhelms people, but you can make it easier on yourself if you just step back and think about. I've seen a lot of people just jump in and create design decks, pitch decks,
Mm-hmm.
without doing the outlines first. And I used to do that too because it's more fun, right? Like you can design things and put the photos in. But I'm like, if you do the outline first, then it takes the time out of
Yeah.
creating that deck because now you know what you're going to talk about.
Yeah. All right, a couple of lightning round questions for you.
Yeah.
What's something you've changed your mind about content marketing over the years? Something that you've felt strongly about, I don't know, 10 years ago that you're like, actually, I don't think that, or I think about it a little bit differently today.
Oh, interesting. That's a hard one. I
I can
embrace.
tell you mine while you
Yeah, please go ahead. I'll think about it.
I used to be so anti-paid social. I was just like, if you're
uh,
putting media behind it, then it's not a real story, and who cares? And I'm still not necessarily an expert at paid social, but I understand the power of it and of it's in essence a distribution model for storytelling right now. So
Absolutely.
uh,
That's a huge thing. And that's the other big mistake that I think a lot of companies make. They're like, we're going to create this content and put it out there and people will find it. No, they never find it.
yeah,
Yeah, a majority of my budget for Marriott Traveler every year was paid. Like
yeah,
you had to put it out there. Like otherwise, no one was ever going to find it. And I
right.
still see companies do that and all the time. For me, it was really a print. I think I'm a print guy. I love magazines. That's how I basically started my career, grew my career. You don't need print.
Does
People
that hurt
aren't.
you? Does that pain your little print heart?
It does a little. I still love it. I love to hold and flip through things. I see a
You're
lot of
like, this
people.
is for me, but it's not for 97% of people in the world.
It has to do the right thing and has to be done with a purpose. Like
Yeah,
any print I do now is something you want to keep and collect
that's
and
good.
put on your shelf.
That's good.
It
I
has to
like
be
that.
super high quality. Otherwise, just do digital.
Yeah.
Like,
And then I started this episode kind of telling you that Marriott was someone that I watched and followed and tracked. And you know, we went on to flip our blog from like an insider blog to something called Discover Universal. And
mhm.
we went and hired a journalist to run a Discover Universal and kind of run it like a editorial magazine. Very much smaller scale than what you guys are doing at Traveler. Who do you watch? Who do you look at and you're like, man, they're doing good stuff. I want to do that. Man, that's really cool what they're doing over there.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of brands kind of like pulled back recently. Like you saw this big resurgence in what companies were doing. I think Red Bull still does it really well. Even they aren't doing it as much as they were, like going crazy. It's still video, but their magazine was great. Like everything they were doing was super high quality. Um, I think there's a lot of smaller little brands. Like I thought Away did a really good job with their
Mm-hmm.
publication, and obviously, there have been changes there, but. There's a site called Roadbook that's in the travel space right now that I think is really interesting. Um, look at a lot of the brands from Europe are experimenting and doing things now. They always kind of have with experiential and events. There's a lot of stuff there. It's interesting. Fast Company has always been one of my favorite magazines, and because they cover business, and any business story can be interesting if you cover it the right way. And I think that kind of inspired me to get into brand storytelling too, because I remember there was a story about baby carrots that just like blew me away, and I'm like, this is the most interesting story about baby carrots I'll probably ever read. And I'm like, you can do anything, you can cover any business story if you take the right angle. And I think a lot of brands, I'm sorry, veering off from what your question was, but I think when brands get too worried about what they're going to do with content or what stories they're going to tell, they're too close to it. They need to back away and just like think differently, have fun. Brands don't have fun with their brands anymore, and how they connect with consumers, because it goes back to that campaign. Like, it has to be the campaign, it has to do certain things. And so I would keep an eye on a lot of car companies. They're experimenting and doing a lot more too. I think most of the effort right now is in experiential events, because they know people are going to them. My biggest problem with a brand, if they're sponsoring an event, is, does the attendee know that that brand is part of that event and that they're even there? Like, yeah, you can park a car in front of the entrance or whatever, but what else are you doing? Like, how are you engaging with that person then after? That, again, feels cool and like a story and not just an ad.
Yeah. Well, Mark, this has been fun. Anything else that you're working on that we can talk about that you might want to kind of promote or get some attention around?
Yeah, I would NMG, keep an eye on NMG. I think what they're doing is super amazing. They've got another thing that I'm the editor of is Lay, which is the laytravel.com is the website. It is geared towards, it's like an elevated, sophisticated media brand for LGBT travelers. And it used to be focused just on LGBT travelers coming to Hawaii, and now it's more global. That's been a fun one that I've been growing with email newsletters and videos and different things. So I'm really happy with that. That's also another category of people that a lot of brands are not staying away from, but they don't know how to necessarily engage with them. And just stop overthinking it. Like, we have a lot of money to spend. We buy a lot of things we probably don't need.
Talk to us.
We spend a lot of money we probably don't need to spend on certain things. So anyway, it's a very valuable,
very cool.
So
all right. Can people follow you anywhere, or are you
I'm everywhere on Instagram, Mark Graser, easily findable on LinkedIn. I'm on all the channels.
Cool. Well, dude, I appreciate it. Really appreciate your take. You've been, you've been doing great work for a long time. You've inspired me along the way, and it's good to finally get a chance to kind of go deep on some of this stuff. And I'm excited to get this episode out there and see what people think. So appreciate the time today.
Thanks for taking the time. It was great to talk to you, Eric.
All right, that's another episode of Radical Content with Mark. Thanks for joining us. We'll have another episode very, very soon. Do all the things if you can. Add some comments, add reviews. That's how we know that this is connecting and we can produce more of these content. So if you need anything, we're here. Appreciate it. See everybody.
I'm feeling good. The sun is shining. I knew